Yo, yo, welcome to the show. Today is going to be so awesome. If it's your first time to ever hear a When Words Don't Come Easy podcast, you picked the right day. We have the executive pastor over ministries at Journey Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And he's also been in youth ministry for over, 21 years. He's been at the church itself for 25 years. And this dude is just a phenomenal human being. He really is. Dear friend of mine. And I'm grateful that he is sharing with you today. He owns this topic. He absolutely owns it and he slays it. You're going to love it. And stick around to the end because he gives book recommendations that will also help support and help you with taking care of your Sabbath, which is what he's talking about. Very phenomenal episode. I've never heard it spoke about this way. So you're going to absolutely love this. He's also sharing a link that goes over several different topics of soul care. So you have to stick around to the end to get that. But whether it's anxiety or depression or things that you're dealing with, we're going to share this link with you as well on how to get that. So thanks for being here. But first, you got to check this out. Welcome back to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. I'm Andy Howard. It's so good to have you. Today is a special day. I have my dear friend with me, Jon Brown, and I'll introduce him in a second. But this is week 3 of our 4-week series on the self-love series. So excited for how it's going so far. We've discussed the body, we've discussed finances, and in no particular order of these 4, we're rolling through them. But today's is on the soul and on the spirit. And I was talking to Jon earlier before we started this, and I didn't even realize, but this is his wheelhouse. This is one of his favorite subjects he likes to talk about. But before we do that, let me introduce my dear friend, Jon Brown. Welcome, Jon. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. So excited to be with you and be a part of this podcast. I'm a listener and have been growing with you, but also really excited to serve those of you who are listening today, hopefully in a small way.
Oh, man, it's going to be great. I mean that with all my heart. I've already got a sneak peek of his notes. In fact, the way God works for me is sometimes he has to really drill it in my head for me to get something. And so yesterday, our pastor at our church, at the time of this recording, was preaching on this exact same topic. And then when I talked to you pre-show meetings, you're telling me what's been on your heart, and we hadn't even really dove in other than the broad topic that I gave you on. And it's like the exact same thing. And so usually when that happens, it's like, okay, God, I am listening. I'm hearing your message here. And I know it's not just for me, but it's going to help a lot of people. But before we dive into that, man, just tell it. I know you're from Kenosha, Wisconsin, right? Or that's where your church is. Is that where you live as well?
Yeah, live in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Grew up in Minneapolis. I'm a Vikings fan. And sorry to all of you who are, but probably if you're listening, there's a good chance your team's not in the Super Bowl either. So
I was going to say at this point it's down to 2. So it's always hard for, when I was growing up, man, my junior high years and my sophomore year, I just thought we won every year. I'm a Cowboys homer. So I thought it was just like this every year. And it's been a long time, man.
Yeah. So I'm in Packer country, growing up a Vikings fan, but also in Bears country. So being right on the border of Illinois, we're a suburb of Chicago, but we're sandwiched right between Milwaukee and Chicago.
Wow.
So I'm the least hated of the teams. So there's a lot of Packers fans that kind of consider me an ally, and a lot of Bears fans that kind of consider me an ally. Who would have guessed, right? So gotta love
that's
it.
Awesome. That's awesome. You fit in nicely with 2 different orgs there.
Oh, crazy.
Well, hey, you are my favorite guest to ever have from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I grew up a huge fan of Skillet, still am. And so I know John Cooper is from Kenosha. Have you ever bumped into him at Target or Walmart or anything like that?
Bumped into his wife at Summer Moon Coffee just about a week ago. And I was standing in line behind John Cooper at Noodles and Company maybe a couple years ago. So I see them randomly. They go to a good friend's church here in Kenosha, just preached a couple weeks ago. So at that church, Living Light Church. So yeah, I love Skilled as well. I love their show. It's been a long time fan.
Man, so just hearing you say that, I wouldn't have been able to compose myself. I guess you guys may be used to bumping into them, but I would have lost it. So I'm glad it was you and not me, because they probably would have had some kind of restraining order on me. So that's really cool. But
come hang out. We'll go hang out with Skillet when they're in. That would be fun.
For sure. Well, today we're touching on the soul. You're huge on soul care, and in fact, you guys stick around to the end because we have some just phenomenal stuff we're going to share with you that his church and his pastor have put together, and some great tools and some great gifts that will help you. But Jon himself, well, recently we got to go to Israel together, man, and it was just phenomenal. I know you've been before. Myself, it was my first experience, and so I had heard about it so much. But the only way I can describe it, it's like it puts your faith on steroids. It was just, everything was just so emotional, so powerful. Seeing the signs, like, I describe it as like when you've seen those signs, like Elvis Presley was born here or something in a town, but then you walk in and you're like, these are the streets where Jesus grew up, or it's just powerful, man. And it was a phenomenal 10 days. And one of the coolest things, though, for me, we went with 22 other pastors, and it was so cool seeing all the different sites. But one of my favorite moments was when we're just grabbing lunch or grabbing coffee somewhere at one of the breaks, and we'd be huddled together, and 4 or 5 of us here. And one time I got to sit next to you, and you're going around talking to people, asking them about their Sabbath, how they handle their Sabbath. And you said it was something that you've really added to your life since Israel, and you've been before, but it's something that you're going to share with us today. And I would love to hear a little bit more about that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, what a trip that was.
Yeah.
You have not had a chance to go to Israel. You need to make a plan. Yeah. Maybe Andy and I need to lead a trip together to Israel, and you can join us. For all the listeners of the podcast.
Hey, that is confirmation. Let's do it, man. That would be so fun.
It would be so fun. Yeah. But so many things. People ask me all the time, what was your most spiritual moment or favorite moment of Israel? Where was it that you heard God's voice or just experienced him in a more real way? And there's so many. How could you even possibly, answer that question? Obviously, the Garden of Gethsemane was life-changing and emotional. Seeing the place where Jesus rose from the dead, the tomb, the garden tomb, so many amazing moments. But one of them was probably a surprise to me. I didn't even know it was part of our agenda. We got to eat a Shabbat dinner, a Sabbath dinner with a Jewish family in their home. Powerful, right? They invited us into their home, into their family time. And the streets just shut down. Every shop, irregardless of whether or not they're Jewish or not, every shop and place of business, it's almost kind of spooky. There's no cars on the street. Like, it just goes quiet, right?
If you could describe that, it was a very, very busy season before that. So there was trains running up and down the streets, there's buses, taxis, foot traffic. Regular traffic. So it was very busy. And then you're exactly right. Then at that time during the Shabbat, during the Sabbath and Shabbat dinner, we were like the only 22 on the streets. It was very wicked.
It is just like, maybe not spooky, just eerie. Like, it's just crazy how it's noisy and then it's just quiet. And I don't think we as Americans, I'm guessing most of you who are listening to this are American, right? I don't think we know how to handle quiet. It feels odd. It feels foreign to us. And it was just quiet. And we got to go into this family's home, and we got to experience a Sabbath dinner, a Shabbat dinner. That's how they kick off their 24 hours of Sabbath. And to be a part of those moments where the father speaks a blessing over his wife and speaks a blessing over his children, and we thank God for his goodness. It really is the start of 24 hours for them of rest, right? And carrying for our souls, caring for our spirit, I think really starts there. I think that's a often forgotten practice in America. And so I think why it was so refreshing to me, and I believe for you too, Andy, is we got to see a picture, a little glimpse of heaven, a little glimpse of what God intended for us as human beings when he commanded. It's actually one of the 10 commandments to take the Sabbath and remember it, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, right? That's actually where the term holiday comes from. It comes from the term holy day. Holy day is how we got the word holiday. And so we've kind of lost meaning. We've lost the meaning. And being in the Jewish culture and seeing how they observe and remember the Sabbath and keep it as a holy day inspired me. The first time I went a couple years ago, Andy, before you and I went together, I literally was in tears, weeping, feeling convicted about the fact that I did not have this practice as part of my life, and that I had neglected to keep the Sabbath, and just seeing what it looked like and how beautiful it was, refreshed my soul and really inspired me. Sometimes I think we look at Sabbathing or the Sabbath as like instead of one of the 10 commandments, we look at it as one of the 10 suggestions, right? It's like, well, I don't really have time, or if you knew my life, or, I had certainly seen it even as a pastor as a suggestion. I certainly took days off. I loved it, my days off, but it usually became an errand day. But they don't even run errands on that day. They really, truly keep it as holy. So it really began the journey for me of what does Sabbath look like for me and for my family? How can I better care for my soul? And yes, the beautiful part of the family blessing and the blessing, the prayer blessing over my wife and over my children. It's become a beautiful wrestle. I don't have it all figured out, but I am excited to talk with you more about that today, and just the inspiration of that, what that looks like to care for our soul and our spirit in a better way, in the way that God intended.
It really was powerful. In fact, gosh, so there was 22 of us, I believe, on the trip. Okay. And we all kind of got to go around and share. I believe he asked us, hey, share a little bit about yourself and what you've enjoyed the most over this. And that was probably around day 8 or 9. It was getting towards the end of our 10-day journey. And to a man, it almost got to where, okay, this kind of felt like a cop-out, but it felt, every one of us were so moved, because when it came time to pray the blessing over his son, he grabbed him by his face and they went forehead to forehead. And I didn't understand the prayer. He didn't speak it in English for us, but you felt the prayer. You felt the power of just him praying a blessing over his son. And it's something that I have adapted, praying a blessing over my girls. And I don't know, I guess we do take it for granted, right? We wear busyness, or we wear hard worker. You see the Mamba mentality, and these are all good things. They can be, but at the same time, just as good is the rest period, and a time to kind of redo inventory, if you will, and to stop and just spend time with God and slow down and pause. And so that was what I took away with it, was the blessing of him giving his kids and his wife a blessing, as you mentioned earlier. What are some good practices for someone to say maybe they've grown up in church and they have heard about the Sabbath, but they've never practiced it, or maybe they're brand new to faith and maybe they think, oh, that's only on Sundays. It's Sunday because that's the Sabbath, or Saturday evening. What would you say to someone who's brand new to it to set up some good practices in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. I remember wrestling with this when I first started to kind of dive in, and I felt a little uncomfortable, because it was like, I knew that it was one of the 10 commandments. I knew that it was something I should be doing. and yet it was confrontational and a little disruptive because I was trying to figure out how can I fit this in and do I want to, and really understanding it. It was like kind of confronting me, like looking me eyeball to eyeball and going, "You're not doing this," and realizing it made me uncomfortable that it was not even remotely a part of my life other than just doing a day off. So I just want to share a couple of quotes because we're going to use the terms soul care here. And Judah Smith in his book, one of the books that we'll recommend at the end, says, our souls are most at home when they return to God. So if you can think of soul care as just simply returning to God, right? Our souls are most at home when they return to God. That's beautiful. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about caring for our soul, caring for our spirit. It's just simply returning to God, finding our home in Him. And another scripture, I mentioned the 10 Commandments from Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11 is where we're just encouraged on remembering the Sabbath. But another scripture that I think we maybe don't quote as often is Hebrews 4, 9 through 11, Andy, that I think is really a challenge to us as followers of Jesus, for those of us who follow Him. But even if you don't follow Jesus and you're listening to this podcast, I think of it as if like your boss came into you at work and pulled you into his office and said, "Hey," and I know, Andy, you work for yourself, but Matt, and maybe a lot of you who listen to this also work for yourself. You're your own boss. But imagine your boss pulling you into his office and saying, "Hey, I want to just talk with you about something. You're a great worker. You're incredible. We're going to give you a raise this year. But on top of that, we would like," I was talking with our board, and we would like to give you 52 days off extra this year. 52 days of rest, to just be at home. You're not allowed to work, check your emails, check your text messages. 52 days to just enjoy life and enjoy your family and rest. We think you're that incredible. I mean, who wouldn't go, yes, hallelujah.
Sign me up.
Sign me up, I'll take it. That's even better than a bigger paycheck, honestly.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a gift. And God is literally looking at you and I and saying, I want to give you the gift of rest. This is for you. So whether you believe in God or not, just the fact that like the practice and the habit, and by the way, neuroscientists talk about this and how powerful this is. So you don't even have to believe in God to know that this is powerful. Hebrews 4, 9 through 11, though, says this: so there is a special rest. I like that word or that phrase, special rest. There is a special rest still waiting for the people of God. For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world, right? He worked for 6 days and then rested on the seventh. And it goes on to say, so let us do our best to enter that rest. We have to actually actively choose to enter that rest. But then it says, if we disobey God as the people of Israel did, we will fall. And I wonder if a lot of the reason why you and I were talking about this, experience the high levels of anxiety, depression. We see moral failures in marriages and families falling apart. We see people that are burning out and just quitting and walking away. We obviously have seen this in an accelerated way coming out of 2020 and 2021. I wonder if a lot of those moments of high levels of anxiety that I've experienced have come from my pedal to the metal work ethic, right? I am an A-type personality that's like, man, all or nothing, let's go, right? But I have not observed this, as I mentioned, and it says if we disobey God in this area, we will fall. And I think this is so important, and I believe that He has a special rest waiting for us. And so that's really what Sabbath and soul care is all about. If you look at just to break this down in the practice side of it, as you asked, now that we jump into that, if you were to break this word Sabbath down, the Hebrew word for Sabbath is Shabbat, which is what we call the dinner, right? With the Jewish family that we got to go and experience in their home. Shabbat, or Sabbath, literally, the translation of that is 4 different Hebrew words. It means to stop. It means to rest. It means to delight, and it means to worship. So stopping, resting, delighting, and worshiping. What my Sabbath day looks like, for me, it's different days and different seasons, but right now it's Friday, and my wife and I observe it from Thursday night into Friday night, but around the time that we pick up our girls for dinner. And so really we run it through the lens of, am I stopping being on my phone, stopping checking my emails? I don't have thankfully anymore, a honey-do list on my Sabbath. I'm not doing anything. I'm stopping all of that. I'm stopping my consumerism. I'm stopping the madness of being available to anyone and everyone, right? It's just the stopping of all the work and all the hustle and all the worry and all the anxiety, and it's laying those things aside for 24 hours. It's resting. So practically, what does that look like? We sleep in. Like this last Sabbath, I got up early with the girls and helped get them off to school, and my wife slept in. We take turns letting each other sleep in. We take more naps on our Sabbath. Come on, somebody, right? Like, let's go. So like typically what we'll do is we'll wake up and we'll help get the girls off to school, one of us, and then we'll just spend extra time. We'll throw some worship music on, just play some playlists, and we'll get into our Bible. I'll journal more. I'll kind of linger. And typically as I'm lingering and just taking that time slow, I have a pretty killer morning routine, and I'm pretty regimented on all the other days, but this one's more loose and just free flowing. And I'll oftentimes just doze off into a nap in the middle of or after that. It's awesome, right? With the sun shining through the windows, and we're just spending time with Jesus, and we're just resting, and we're delighting, and we're worshiping. It's just extra time with Jesus. And then the delight part, I think, is the part that I didn't get before. I kind of knew some of these other things, what Sabbath could look like, but the delighting is hobbying. I mean, God created us to delight, right? And so when I heard that one, I was like, well, what are my hobbies? I mean, my kids are my hobbies. My family is my hobby. I love working. That's kind of a hobby. And it's like, no, you're not doing any of those things. I mean, yes, I'm still being a dad, and I'm still pouring into my family, but what kinds of things do I enjoy to do? I enjoy hitting the gym. And so part of Sabbathing for me is not working out to like accomplish anything. It's just working out for the joy of experience. So I try and enjoy my workouts more on my Sabbath. We will go on bike rides. We'll take the top off of my Jeep Wrangler, and we'll go for drives underneath the stars. Now, I am from Wisconsin, so there's not a whole lot of that happening right now. We'll do things that we'll do family game nights. We'll just pull out card games or board games and play a game together, like super simple, right? Feels like we're going back to, Little House on the Prairie, but it's awesome, right? We're finding things. We're going for walks, my wife and I. We take the kids to the park. We're just simple. We're just going simple. And delight is also finding hobbies. Maybe it's going to a coffee shop with people that you enjoy. I don't know what that looks like for you, or even if you have a family, but maybe taking some time to write down, what is it that brings me joy? Maybe it's going golfing, right? Or just going for a drive, but it's finding those things. I actually rediscovered the joy of reading fiction. So I read a lot of leadership books and a lot of church growth books, and, maximizing my potential books. And like I'm reading Atomic Habits again. I love those, but on those days, it's not about production. On Sabbath, it's about enjoyment. So I'll bust out a fiction book. I haven't read fiction before I started Sabbathing. I hadn't read it since high school when I had to for class, right? So it was like, this is actually enjoyable. So that's what Sabbath practically looks like for me. And we've had to like different rhythms as our kids have grown too. Like, how do you do it with young kids? There's some great podcasts out there about that. But if you're wanting to kind of wrestle through that, depending on the age of your family or your kids or your season, there's some great resources out there for you, and probably another podcast for another time. But that's what Sabbath looks like for me in soul care. So 52 times a year, I am taking time to stop, to rest, to delight, and to worship. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful rhythm as part of our lives in the Brown family. So
Man, I love that. And thanks for sharing. And I like how this can fit anybody, anyone's schedule, whether if you have littles, and sometimes you may have to, like, say Friday may not work for you. The point would be find where it works in your schedule, but observe a Sabbath day and stop, rest, worship, and delight. I love those four. Very powerful. And so what I also like is you have four different, I don't know if you'd call them four different like system type things. Basically, there's one that you do every single day, 365 times a year. There's one you do once a week, 52 times a year. There's one you do 4 times a year. And then there's one that you focus on 1 time a year. Will you run through those 4 things with me and expand on that, what that looks like for you guys?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because I am a high level thinker and pedal to the metal. One of the things I like to say is I like to run hard, I like to play hard, and I like to rest hard. And so because my life is about high levels of production, and I just strive to continually better myself. I think a lot of high performers listen to this podcast. If you're like me and you found this podcast to be so successful, and Andy, your life is inspiring in that way, I think it's important for us to remember healthy soul care rhythms, right? If you don't put the systems in place, you'll fall. We don't rise to the level of our intentions. We fall to the level of our systems. And so that's so important that we put great systems in place to help us, because the gravitational pull of our world, of our success obsessed Western culture, is away from rest, right? It's about production, not about rest. So thinking about what it looks like to care for our soul again. Remember Judah Smith's definition: our souls are most at home when they return to God. So I think of soul care rhythms as returning to God. So 365 days a year, I have created a system, a morning routine that starts with me rolling out of bed and rolling onto my knees, just simply acknowledging, God, I need you today. Humble me, make me more like you. Help me to love people better today than I did yesterday. Help me to see people, to hear people, and care for people in a way that only can come from you. That's the fruit of the Spirit, right? I'm just pouring out my heart and just starting my day in a place of humility. I jump right away into the Word. The first thing I want my eyes to focus on is His Word, not some words in a text message that are going to stress me out because someone needs me. The world will always need me, but my soul needs to return to God in the morning, right? So I get in the Word. I'm doing a 365-day plan with 20 other brothers right now. It's awesome. We're all committed to sharing it's a YouVersion plan that we're doing together, and we're reading through the Bible in a year. And so I'm caring for my soul by returning to God in the morning. I'm starting my day with Him. So that is the first part of my day. And then, of course, I go hit the gym after that. I'm fueling my body properly. I'm hitting the gym. I'm stretching. I'm doing all of those things. But before I do that, it's what goes in here, and how I hit the ground on my knees. So that's part of my rhythm and my routine in the morning. Then the 52 times a year, we talked about that, Sabbathing, or Shabbat, stopping, resting, delighting, and worshiping, and running what a Sabbath looks like through that filter. And by the way, I forgot to mention this, Andy. Like right now, we're in the middle of club volleyball season. All 3 of our girls play club volleyballs. So sometimes I have to shift my Sabbath to another day of the week because Fridays don't work, right? So just about the time when I start to get the Sabbath rhythm down, I have to shift it to some other time. And I have to fight for it because it doesn't come naturally. Like everything in our schedule wars against this. So I have to fight for Sabbath. And I think that's important. If you feel like it's a fight or a wrestle, welcome to the club. It's just the reality of life. But 4 times a year, these other 2 rhythms, 4 times a year, I take a half day or a full day to do what I call a soul care day. If you follow me on Instagram or social media, you'll see that. I mean, we have one coming up We actually just had one as a staff. Our staff does this. Our pastor writes the guides, and we're going to share these with you, I believe, in the show notes. We have like 10 or I think around a dozen of them online that we'll give you the link for. But these are guided soul care moments that bring you into the scripture and bring you to a place of, maybe it's dealing with anxiety and you're just feeling that tightness in your chest, or maybe it's just some people that you need to forgive, but it's just a guided soul care day that you can go to a coffee shop or go to your favorite place, maybe by a lake, or just a place that refreshes your soul, and go and get away with God and take extra time to dive in and to journal. It's beautiful. And I do that 4 times a year without fail. It is systematized into my life, and it's not optional. And so if I happen to miss the day that's designated, I have to reschedule it that same day and lock it into my schedule and block it off. I have all of those dates blocked off in my calendar for all of 2023. They're a rock in my schedule. And then one time a year, for me, it will take place at the beginning of October. I do a 3-day silent prayer retreat that's hosted by our denomination. It's specifically for pastors and church leaders. But you can do those. There's all sorts of places that do those. You could actually look that up, silent prayer retreat, if you just Googled it, and you could probably find one in your area. It's a really beautiful. I thought when I first heard about this, I thought that sounds like torture, to go and be someplace for like 3 days and not talk to anyone, because I'm such a social being. I know you're more introverted than I am, Andy, but I was like, this sounds like torturous. Who would do this? But once a year, I go away and get away for 3 days straight and just spend time with God in the Word, in worship. And I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just allowing my soul to decompress and defragment so that I can show up better for the people that I love and that I'm called to love.
That's awesome, bro. All of it. And I love that you do, because if you do not plan this, right? If you do not put it in your schedule, and I don't want to give the devil any credit at all. I don't like doing, but you will miss it, right? Mm-hmm. He'll get busy, or life happens, and if you wait for it to happen, if you're passive aggressive, I'm going to do this. You're hearing this podcast today, and you're like, oh, these are all great things. I'm going to do this one day.
Yeah,
you will find yourself so busy. It just won't happen. It's not on purpose. It just won't happen unless you are intentional about right now. You pause the podcast and you pull out your phone. That's what's beautiful about these things. They have calendars. They have everything we need. In fact, they have so much stuff we get ourselves in trouble. That's why these Sabbath is so good, right? But schedule it in there. The calendar, that's beautiful. And I do love what you mentioned. That's funny. You talked about introverts. I think I could excel at that one. In fact, it's kind of weird, but everyone was talking about how hard 2020 was. I was built for, this is going to come out awful. I was built for COVID, man. I was built for that season when we were in lockdown. I would just lock myself in my room and I'm good. But seriously, make a plan to put these 4 steps, because that was just gold as you were sharing this. Whether you've been a Christian all your life or you're brand new, or even as you said, maybe you're not even a believer yet, man, this will help you. I was hearing yesterday, our pastor was sharing this sermon, and I know you all know Chick-fil-A, and it's like the #1 fastest growing fast food restaurant and most popular fast food restaurant. And they get more accomplished out of 6 days a week. Yep. Than those others do with 7. And there's just something to, when you give God his first, he will bless us. And our pastor even went on, and I could really mess you up, but he went on to talk about a certain denomination who honors the Sabbath very strictly. They're very religious about honoring the Sabbath. And that particular group on average live 11 years longer than the normal human lives. And so it's wild to the day if you look it up. And he pulled out his phone and did the math in front of us, which was cool. But he took the average days lived minus the Sabbath, and then he took those extra days of the 11 years, and it came down to the day, 11 years. It's almost as if for every day you honor God with the Sabbath, he adds on a day to your life.
Yeah.
That was just, and I don't know if that's just a weird coincidence or what. I can't guarantee anything. I know God has your days numbered, but I do believe when we put him first and we honor him first, he gives us so much more and we're refreshed. You had mentioned several books that I think will help us through this time. You had book recommendations. Would you mind sharing some of those? We'll also put them in the show notes as well. And then as far as any other closing things that maybe God has put on your heart that you'd like to share today.
Absolutely. Well, the book recommendations, several of the things I mentioned have actually, my own study has been in these books. One of them is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I love John Mark Comer's stuff. That book, I will just admit, I hate to admit this, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I sped read it the first time I read it. So totally missed the point, right? Like that's the high performer in me. I'm like, I'm gonna speed read through this thing, and then I was like, wait a second, the irony of this is so I had to read it again. I read it much slower, and I will probably read it again. But I highly recommend this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. To Hell with the Hustle by Jefferson Bethke. Take the Day Off by Robert Morris. And then Holy Hustle by Crystal Stine. All really great resources that can help you find better rhythms for your soul. And I do believe that if we will trust God, just kind of like the principle of tithing, isn't it, Andy? Like God can do more with our 90% than we can do with our 100%. And it's the same. God can do more with our 6 days than we can do with our 7. There's just something about giving him a day. Saying, God, I trust you. I know one thing's for sure. There is a God and I am not him, right? That's what Sabbathing is saying. It's just simply acknowledging the fact that you're not God and the world is going to keep going on without you. One day, the world is going to go on without us.
Yeah.
Right? We are not going to live for eternity. So one day the world will go on without us. And we can take a day to acknowledge that and acknowledge God and invite him in. I think it's beautiful when we do that. And I, for one, am trying to get better at this. I'm not perfect. I don't want to present myself as perfect. One of the practical things I would share, Andy, that I do, these little notifications that you can swipe down in your settings and do like a do not disturb mode or driving or personal or sleep or work mode. And you can put your phone into a focus mode if you have an iPhone. We won't get into those of you who don't have an iPhone, but that's another podcast for another day too. But under the driving setting, you can customize your notification that pops up. And so I have a notification for Sabbath that I put up. So I just click on that and you can go in and customize it to say what you want. But it just says, I was trying to pull it up, but it says something to the effect of, I'm taking today to Sabbath and spend time with my family and resting. And so thank you for understanding that. And if you need anything, you can leave me a message, or if it's super urgent, you can call me a couple times and it'll go through. But just a simple notification to let people know. What I've found is when people get that notification, at first I thought people are going to think it's weird, or people are going to kind of be like judgy about it. Like they're going to be like, okay, Mr. Holy Man, observing the holy day, right? Like I don't know what I was thinking people would think. But you know what people have thought? That's really cool. Tell me more about that. I have friends that I have motivated to start considering Sabbath and diving into what that could look like for them. I have so many friends that have decided I need to do that because of my life. And that's what I believe that this podcast is all about, living lives that inspire others to become the best versions of themselves, right? And we cannot become the best versions of ourselves unless we are taking time to regularly return our souls home to our Father. So that little practical tidbit hopefully can help those of you who will want to take a day in Sabbath. Just letting people know, hey, I'll get back to you. For me, I'll get back to you on Saturday. But right now, this is a day where I'm taking to rest. So
it's true, man. And you know what's going to happen? Life will go on for that person as well. They will make it till you get back. I know some of us are so itchy that we have to, I have to respond. I have to respond. And take that time. This is so important that God, on his top 10 list of things he could tell us, top 10 commandments, right? He put it in there right along with, don't commit adultery, don't murder someone, don't tell a lie, observe the Sabbath. And I think we forget that one. It's like one of the top 10 that's like, not on purpose. It is. It's just one of the, God understands that. I'm type A. He made me this way. He understands. He put it in his top 10 list, right? That's pretty awesome. So,
and he himself rested, right?
Yes.
He didn't just say you should do this. He rested himself. So, yeah.
Yes. Very powerful. Thank you so much. This has been one of my favorite episodes. I mean that with all my heart. I love you dearly. And I thank you for taking the time to pour into the listeners here, and take some time over this. Watch this one a couple of times, because there was a lot that was thrown your way, and I hope you absorbed it all. But at the same time, you may miss something if you just try to absorb it all in one big bite. So take some time, come back and watch this again, because this is so valuable. I believe with all my heart, if you get this right, this principle right, God will help you with the rest of it. In fact, you may be praying for a way to fix something else, and he's wanting to speak to you on one of these Sabbath days where he's going to line out the rest of it. So get this part right, get this piece of the puzzle right in your life. Everything else is going to work itself out. I believe that with all my heart. Jon, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. Thank you for serving us in this way. Thank you for your podcast. Thank you for all that you pour into these. Thank you for the gift of this community.
Well, thank you, bro. And for those who may want to find out more, and also we didn't even touch on it but you and your wife are independent Optavia coaches, have a phenomenal business helping people get healthy. If there's someone here, I know it's February, so New Year, people are trying to get healthy with their body. You and your wife help a lot of people do that. How can they find you guys or your wife and learn more about your program that you teach?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. My wife is as well, at PJon for Pastor Jon. That was what our students called me back in the day, Pastor Jon. So PJon, PJON on Instagram. My wife is at Janet_Brown. And we love helping people level up their health in all areas, including soul care health and physical health. And as we know, as part of this series, they're all integrated. You cannot disintegrate these areas, right? Body, mind, and spirit, they're all
so valuable
together. So when you start to take care of one, it flows into all the other areas because they're all integrated. So
for sure. Well, man, thank you so much. It's been an honor having you on, and just always fun catching up with you. But thanks for doing this, bro.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Appreciate you.
Yo, I told you, my guy, Jon Brown, would totally slay this. And I hope that you are as blessed as I am right now. I mean, that absolutely rocked my socks off, which is a term of endearment from a Texas boy like me. So anyways, I pray that's been a blessing to you. I know so many times we, I don't know. I've grown up a PK, which a preacher's kid. I was in ministry for over 20 years. And I don't know how often us Christians speak of the Sabbath. We may say, honor the Sabbath, but what's that actually mean? Well, you just got what it means. And it couldn't have been delivered any better. That was so good. So thankful for Jon and for his time today. And we are going to put some amazing links that him and his team and his staff there have put together that he is so willingly gave us to all you listeners. So it's going to be in the show notes here where you can go check those out. But thank you guys so much for being here. If this episode has blessed you, And I just told you so. I told you it has. So I know it has. You got to go bless somebody else with it. Please share this episode with somebody. Maybe someone's new to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. They have no idea who I am. Share this episode with them. It will be a blessing to them. And that's why I do this, to give hope to people in so many different areas. And our soul care is huge. So important. One of the 4 areas we've been talking about this month about self-love. And he just gave you a great way to love your soul. So I hope that will bless you. Give me a review, if at all possible, a 5-star review so others can find out more hope about this podcast. And again, if you've never heard of the book, When Words Don't Come Easy, and you think it would be a blessing to someone suffering anxiety or depression, andyhoward.com has it. andyhoward.com. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it even, I'll read it to you on Audible. Maybe you're a Kindle person. It's there as well. So I pray that will be a blessing to you. Again, leave some good reviews on that as well so that others will find it, because that's my whole goal, is to share hope with as many people as possible. But thank you again for doing this, for showing up and hearing the episode. Jon Brown was amazing. Pass this on to as many people as you can. God bless everybody. See you next time.